Okay. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, my voice is loud and clear. Tonight, I would like to speak about a concept where I feel it has a very big importance, and I think it has historic value, to be honest. And really, I was thinking about hunter gatherer societies, and I realized that we are no longer just hunter gatherers of our external realms, that the human being through evolution has gone through a sophistication of an inner acknowledgement of the outer. We no longer just see objects, these objects have a subjective value, and this subjective value seems to be where our imagination is. And if we were to localize imagination, because we consider it to be of light's interaction with the brain, we consider that it's behind our eyes. But really, how imagination comes across, as Mr. Within would said, is like how I would tell you, it's like it's a room that only you can see. Your inner realms as a human being are kinda how life was received by you. Every person's reception of life is different, which means the inner realms of people can be different or they can be similar only if they're void. I thought about a hunter gatherer society. I thought about back in the day some person going and finding berries that the tribe had never found, and that person brought back those berries. And people were like, "Holy shit, there's berries here, man. Thanks. You kind of enlightened our civilization. You showed us where berries are. You discovered berries." And then you see another person's like hunted a buffalo and he's come back, and so that person has found a buffalo you know so there was a unique value in bringing the new and introducing it to your civilization, to your tribe, you know to that hunter gatherer society. Now I find we as human beings, we're not it's like just like if when a person buys a steak from a store, they don't come and show off that steak to someone else. It's like we're no longer it's like it's not so, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like the hunter gathering has evolved from a sort of primitive objective value orientation to what I find that currently we're moving into. I said that after 2020, pretty much after this point, I felt very safe and content, very content to say that the era of advanced communication has begun. And I'll get into later on what I mean by the subtitle, but what I'm suggesting is that we would look outside. We would go exploring our outer realms. We would find something. We would come and share it with the tribe. And so I find instead of external things, we as creatures now, due to the advent of the mind, it has become inner phenomena. And so you see externally, you can totally see berries being new, but what's something that is new in your inner realms? I would say it is data, or a new way for the data that's accessible to be seen. I feel we human beings have two dimensions to us simultaneously all the time. It is just that our language acknowledges one side of the coin. I got the clue from my eyes. That means it's like when I remember when my life kind of took a mystical turn. It took that mystical turn directly into an unknown. And so, what that meant is that most people think that when they go looking after knowledge, they're going to know more. But what happens is the more you know, the more the landscape has increased. It's as if the more of the forest you see, there's more mysterious possibilities. So it's kind of true that I feel no human mind can truly touch the unknown. That means the unknown is not for a personality, it's a presence at most, an instantaneous presence. So the word human being, the word life form, the human and the life part are relating to its energetic presence, and the form and sorry, the in the word human being and in the word life form. If we were to look at both of them, the word human suggests the form, the being suggests the present. In the word life form, the life present suggests the present, the form suggests, in some sense, you can say the personality. So what I'm saying is, our attention is not just a relationship of matter with space, it is also a relationship of space with matter. You as a human being, your conscious awareness, like how you're aware that you're hearing me right now, that awareness is space looking at matter. But when you look at objectivity, when you look at yourself in the mirror, it's an object looking at space. Do you see? Now, the inner realms is, I have called it also the subjective realms, but language isn't the final step. Language is a technology we as a species are using to advance ourselves. You know, this I chose this wallpaper because this girl, I kind of felt this was a sci-fi picture, and it was an implication of the coming cyberspace culture and how human beings are realizing there was a value to doing something physically new. But now there is there's a value to seeing physicality anew. Do you know? So this hunter gatherer inner realms as human beings no longer just doing some external thing, they are finding a way to transform the inner vision into an outer utility. So what that means is genius, Albert Einstein very profoundly said, is the connection of two worlds that had nothing to do with one another. And it's like the inner realm and the outer realm. Any human being who expresses, and every human being is, you know, every human being has to have a relationship with their inner realm, or they can't explain themselves to themselves. You know, like only Tarzan, we can say his inner realms are very dormant. Because when you're living in nature, the nature's movement and engagement is so much that you really don't have any, your attention is too engaged to re-engage into other potentials. You know, this is why it's like the mob mentality is at the same time a cruel but very unique phenomena that happens. That it's the acceptance of the status quo's inner realm, of perception on the inner realm. You know, on some level, we speak about freedom of speech. Western society holds the banner of freedom of speech high. At the same time, you see what is freedom when everybody is trying to kind of, how can I say it? Civilization is not a safe place. This plane of existence has activity that borders on chaos and borders on order. And the best way I've found to kind of approach this reality is that we have to pilot through the chaos and order. So when you see chaotic things, don't freak out, pilot. When you see ordered things, don't freak out, pilot. You know, realize that the value of life is its continuity into novelty. Novelty means whatever happened to you yesterday, you can do something new tomorrow. You have freedom, human being, to do something new. For me, ever since 2011, I became uh, wondrous about my mind. Something fascinated me that I realized up to 2011, I was born in 1991, up to 2011, it was as if I was just an actor that was saying the lines, was doing the things, but had no idea why he was on stage. Do you know? So life felt to me as a sort of unconditional program. And I suddenly opened my eyes in this unconditional program, and I'm being moved by the rivers of this program and conditioning. And then I was wondering, what is this movement? What is the intention of my intelligence upon this plane of existence the moment my eyes open? You know, and so I can tell you, so many people think that answers will save their lives, but sometimes a question can save lives too. Sometimes a question reveals more about the truth than the answer. Questions are beautiful too. They have been shunned in history. you know? You know what's kind of savage? I find that in the next 100 to 150 years, like the kind of cruelty we see in society, if cyberspace culture, civilization, I have a feeling it's going to move that direction. When it gets there, it means the cruelty, it means human beings are going to behave like meaningless simulations around one another. Do you know? By the way, anybody who's listening, I and wants me to share a bit more about certain ideas I'm communicating in this talk, feel free to share in the chat section. I'll engage. So, anyways, this let me get back to course. See, guys, it's very simple. I'm saying in this current moment of existence, this moment of being, this moment that we have attention. Right now, I'm a living being in a moment, and it appears to me as attention to form. So I've noticed that it's as if there was idol worship. Pretty much human beings picked up an object and they looked at that object, you know. And I'll tell you a story. Imagine some person saw a chair, and in that moment there was like light, sunlight hitting the chair, and that guy's like, "This chair is God." And then somebody else comes and says, "Hey man, what are you doing? Give me back my chair." You know, and the guy's like, "This chair is God. Don't touch it. Don't touch God. Don't touch the way I see God." You know? And the person's like, "Give me back my chair." And they're fighting. And eventually the person realizes that chair is not God. It's object worship. We saw an object. We thought that was the source of everything, source of intelligence. Because what is truth, guys? How could truth not be the source of intelligence? It has to be presence oriented, you know? Which there's a interesting point about that in mysticism, in the sense that so many people are trying to find the right personality to enter the pure lands, not realizing their presence is pure by nature. You know, unless you're a AI robot hearing me talk, where in that case you have to build patterns of purity. Pretty much, if like this was in the future and I don't know, an android was listening to me, you have to uh, kind of copy natural and unnatural technology. If it wants to experience some degree of nature, has to copy nature. So in other words, it would mean robots have to act like human beings until they develop a free will that can, I don't know, be satisfactory to the program. Anyways, I'm going astray. This is the notion. Hunter-gatherer society. There's the objective realm. There's the inner realm. We have two eyes that see the same in every moment of being. There's a physical component. Right now, I'm aware of my body. I'm aware of the objects in the room. But when I look at every object and a name pops up into my mind for it, or a symbol pops up for it, that symbol, that subject. Even right now, I ask you, "Who are you?" and you give me an answer. That answer, I say, is coming from your subjective realms. It's a subjective evidence, instantaneous evidence. You can say the skeleton of a subject is awareness. Is language, but um, the world of that being, it what how the metaphors getting too intense. What I'm trying, oh, I forgot to mention this part. After that person takes the chair back from that guy who was worshiping that chair as truth. What do you think human beings went on to after object worship? We went towards worshiping language, and therefore subjectivity for the first time began to become the blueprint of our characters. The way I feel we were able to use language because we saw a value in it. Every technology that has remained, there was a value in it. Everything in your life that has endured so far is because some part of you as a being saw value in it. Now, where does that value come? It's very fascinating. It's as if the story of our lives is behind our eyes, but our actual lives are happening in front of our eyes. The children of the future generations will find the space of the decency of the world shrinking. That means just like how we see, for example, in what is it, places like Japan and China, I think China, the locations of people's homes is becoming smaller, smaller, smaller. So as more people are increasing, and as there's an economical factor to survival, it's as if people are kind of forced to live in small spaces if they want to be up to par. That means, like, if you were a farmer's child and you wanted to come into civilization, it's as if there's no way you could access. So for me, it's as if this class distinction goes incredibly far, and it's because the system is designed to take, it is not designed to give. That's the main issue. Anything in anything, if the governing power, it doesn't matter if you're a CEO, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter if you're Napoleon, if you cannot give, and you take, you become, how can I tell you, the shadow of the moment. Because in giving, you see the vision expand, the vision continue. I remember so many people came up to me and said, not so many people. I mean, like, how can I tell? Certain family members came up to me and they're like, why don't you why are you talking for free? And I didn't have a good answer. It was like something I just felt. I just felt that there was something more. But later on, I understood that the value of the concept living on is way more than just, certain digits at the ATM. Even though that's important too, you know. Hopefully, my filmmaking career takes off. It's very hard. It's very hard when you see that it's kind of strange. It's like life feeds us and then we feed it. There's a symbiosis between the self and the world. That means, like that buffalo, where there was a symbiosis with that bird living on the back of that buffalo, like the bird and the buffalo were like pals. The buffalo would just chill, and the bird would come and, I don't know, eat stuff from the buffalo's back. It was a symbiosis. It was two different ways that intelligence was moving, yet they were coherent. And that's what always fascinated to me. Even Sun Tzu in The Art of War, this general in the battlefield, he understood this. He understood that what wins wars is the balance between heaven and earth. And that balance between the heaven and earth is exactly like the Star Wars Force. The concept of the balance between heaven and earth that was found in ancient traditions and cultures, it has kind of translated into the Force. And what did the Force mean? I don't know how many people perceive Star Wars like this, but for me, the concept of the Force, when the bad guy was like, yo, the Force is strong in this guy. What that meant was, it's as if the will of the moment has chosen him. His free will has been granted allowance. That means as if he's needed more for the play. It's as if that actor has a few more scenes to play. The Force is strong in him. Whatever happens in that moment, he will live on. I find that science, or I shouldn't say science, I should say secular thought, fought against what it considered an absurdity of how the 6th century personified the cosmos. However, in doing so, there was a rejection of imagination. And so, this is the cool thing that, dear human being, whoever you are living in a multi-dimensional plane of existence. It's multiple dimensions occurring simultaneously. This is why happiness is, it has to do with the constitution of your inner realms, and success has to do, external success has to do with the constitution of the outer, you know. And for me, this balance between heaven and earth eventually translated a balance between mind and matter. And what was this balance? This balance was the honesty to confront one's own simplest and most decent self. What does that mean? That means sometimes people act cruel because they feel their simplicity will be rejected. Sometimes the moments get ugly because we are not even in that moment. We are a couple moments ahead. The balance between heaven and earth is how the mind and body are witnessed in the same moment. Your objective realms and your subjective realms are witnessed in the same moment. As I'm speaking right now, how am I speaking to you? I'm not only aware of my objective existence, I'm also aware of the kind of film, river of thought, or the film that is occurring behind my eyes. And I'm just vocalizing that film. You know what's strange? In an existence that is so endless, that means our eyes can't even see the edge of the sky to even begin indexing and measuring physical universal validities. So, hello everybody, welcome to the chat section. Feel free to treat the chat section like how the School of Athens was, where the physicality is civil, but the subjective imagery can roar. Do you know that means even Plato had Diogenes kind of. Diogenes was next level, man. He was a bit crazy, but to our standards, we would look at him and say he was crazy, but pretty much Diogenes took a dead chicken and shouted at Plato and beat him in an argument, and Plato got embarrassed in front of his homies. And that was progress. That was subjective progress. Anyways, guys, there's so much to cover in this talk. Hopefully, for me, it's like there's a city behind my mind that I have to walk in, and then once I've passed uh, every geometrical design, then it's like I feel the talk is can be complete. Anyways, just this important thing, guys. Human beings, we find ourselves in a play of elements. We somehow it's not a somehow, but through the subjective evolution, our intelligence translates the elements, just forces of nature moving atoms in space, as a narrative, as a story. So it's like, if we were to look from behind, how can I say it? If an alien saw us, kind of like, how can I tell you, holding a dog on a leash and thinking outside. So William, hang on, I'll respond to that. It's a good question. Uh, where was it going? Yeah, yeah. An alien sees a human being with a leash, the dog on, like a dog has a leash and it's in the hand of the human being. And an alien sees this and it's like, what is this? Are human beings like taking, advantage of that species? But they don't really see how the human being has opened up a narrative to live life. And really, that's the cool thing about life, because the only day you only not only day the only way you feel it's a new day is because there has been a gap between the narrative of yesterday, the narrative that was projected yesterday through the various states of mind, compared to today. And so for me, it's like the aim of these talks is not to kind of make people feel you have to be certain 24/7. I'm just saying, hey, there's an unknown presence here, and we're that unknown presence. What's up with that? So William, you say Jesus said you're all gods. Um, what do I think the meaning is? I feel Christianity has a complex acknowledgement of existence because it sees the simultaneity of the body, mind, and soul. Or, and of course, this is my interpretation so far. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm not a theologian. But I can see how there is, like Christ, I remember saying to be in the world, but not of it, you know? So I can say the here's my explanation of what Christ could have meant when he said you're all gods. I feel in the future we're going to realize we were never particles in a field. We were a field of intelligence where all particles were moving in. So it would be an apocalypse of individual identity, but not an apocalypse of collective energetic presence and rhythm. So I feel it's a suggestion that before we are particles in space, we are a field. We are the field where all the particles are moving in. I feel that's what it could perhaps have meant. But the thing about religion is that even though I talk about it, guys, for me, it's like it's rare artwork. You know, it's artwork that must be honored in by history, but at the same time it's as if art can have various interpretations, you know and of course I'm not saying it's not true, because on some level the inner realms are self-simulated. That means I could totally think that something is, like, I could think that the whole universe started from some random liquid pouring into a cup, and the universe was the cup, and the energy was the liquid. And so the whole cosmos began when some force poured. Like, we can see the mind. Think of it this way: the mind has an ability to see ink on a page and see meaning in it, but ink on a page is ink on a page. Existence is existence. How our experience navigates through this existence can be different. And the issue has been that we have kind of treated our subjective realms as non existent. And you can even see this in the educational system. The child daydreams in class, and the teacher is like, what is this kid doing? The teacher. So, guys, like you gotta, I hope people in the chat section realize I'm talking about a sort of distancing from the subjective realms. That means when you use language as a human being, be playful because it has multiple interpretations for multiple people, you know? And to be strict about language means that the person's inner realm wants to stay justified, you know? Anyways, guys, I'm kind of slowing down here. The speed limit is much higher. So guys, I'm happy to see the chat section is very lively. I'm gonna speed through this talk, and then at the end of it, I'm gonna engage the chat, and there can be wonderful dialogue. In 2014, when I began these talks, I had a certain exposure and awareness of the metaphysical. I had a lot of ideas. That means I could explain things in many ways, but that explanation seemed to miss something. So I can say that the sense of knowing I have has been strangely similar since childhood, but the sense of ability to do something with the knowing has changed. I feel that we have distracted ourselves out of the grand mystery that is 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing more surreal than that, you know? Imagine yourself in a hunter gatherer society and you have found something new and you have brought it back. Now, back in the day, because the technologies were little, because the people were not distracted and were not self obsessed, they were collective obsessed. You know, that means back in the day, it's as if like personal identity didn't mean anything. That's why kingdoms, the king was like the ego of everybody in that kingdom. Do you know? What that means is if one person from one kingdom went to another kingdom, suddenly somebody from that other kingdom talked smack about their kingdom. Suddenly, the king was their ego, was their pride, was their value. So I find it's the responsibility after 2020 for any being who's alive to acknowledge themselves as a pilot of their attention, of their consciousness, and as an advanced communicator. And what an advanced communicator means is a concept that I kind of found to perfectly fit in, you know, in the sense that the human being understands they are not just an advanced communicator in accordance to how they see themselves. They are an advanced communication of the universal sector. You are strangely the newest thing happening here. That means all the other animals, if they could talk, they'll be like, look at these aliens. You know? It's fascinating. Just by our intelligence being able to acknowledge the finish line, we are so much more superior than other species. They say the main difference between human beings and animals is that human beings are conscious they will die. The intellect provides us a sort of uh, uh, prediction and potential power, you know. So the first thing I noticed, you're not just living in a physical world. As you're walking in the streets, ideas are walking in the streets of people's minds. The civilization, after worshipping objects, began worshipping language. It was first worshipping a language that was outside of itself, then it began worshipping language that was inside itself. This was the fruition of individual identity, where the person, if you really look at your individuality and your identity, it requires a separation from your world. That means the only way I can say I'm walking in the world is if my feet were not connected to the world. Do you know? So we're like a part of Earth that is walking on itself. We're Earth walking on it. So the psychology came to a position where it was like, okay, I'm not just everything happening, I am this, and I am this in accordance to that. So the development of this and that was very crucial. And believe it or not, I say that there was the objective evolution. So I feel there was, we can't even give it a time scale. We can't, because we don't know how many loops there were in evolution. You know what I mean by loops? It's like a video game that you can't pass the level and you keep falling down. So there's no telling how long is kind of ability to conceive our past. There was meaningless evolution. That means the evolution was an endless effort, but the animal wasn't evolving. I found something very unique. I respect biology. I comprehend Darwin. I appreciate his work. I do not deny that human beings, there's an animalistic component to the human being. Like any person who doesn't feel there's an animalistic component, I will advise you, put your palms on the ground, you know, put your palms on the ground and act four-limbed for a second and tell me if you're still doubting if you're an animal. You'll even see the anatomy is even designed, that way. So what it seems is that it's like religion is kind of suggesting the mind of man descended, evolution is suggesting the body of man ascended. Do you see? So it's very kind of fascinating, you know? One is going towards ascending. It started from the bottom. It's like pretty much you can say the theist and the atheist. It's like one is going from the bottom of the mountain to the top, the other is going from the top to the bottom. The value of the human being is pretty much like I remember hearing this incredible kind of professor, and he was also a rabbi, and I forget his name, but he was on stage and very intellectual man. He was saying that he sees as packets of energy, you know? And when you think of yourself as a contained container of energy, like your physical body is containing something, you know? So the relationship of an object with an object became a subject, and the relationship of an object with a subject became the unknown witness. I say the unknown witness because language is an advanced technology, but it is not the ultimate technology. It has a vanishing point, it has limitations. It's like a phone where in your hand, if it's not underwater, it works perfect. When it's underwater, it's not, that phone's kind of gone to the other side, of the ocean. There's this saying, They say when an artist gives out his work, that work is no longer his. When a writer gives out a book, that book is no longer his, you know. Really, guys, I'm just saying we had objective actions to that motivated our species. No longer it's just about being an attention that moves in an objective landscape. The inner realms have to come into responsibility because the idea is that when we were in nature, when we were in the food chain, nature was. Sorry, guys, there was a. I had to check something on the phone. Pretty much, we have to care for our inner realms, acknowledge the language threshold, realize we're not thoughts, our experiential, our experiences will become rhythmic. As they become rhythmic, people will focus less about being individuals and would like to see more collective expansion, you know. So what does that mean overall? It means we have to become responsible for our communication. We have to become responsible for how our free will chose to leave nature's kind of conditional dependence. So what that means is the moment we stepped out of the jungle and we came into cities, it was a sort of responsibility for all the things that nature provided before. Everything that the creature felt while it was part of the ecosystem as a collective part of nature, as it individualized, it had to become responsible for how it perceived the collectivity. Um, so, guys, my attention for a second came to the chat section because I think this kind of relates. So, Matthew, when you say a plant flowers and a tree fruits and an artist artists, um, it's an important distinction to see that you kind of grew out of the world. You know, it's the distinction between the concept of creation and the concept of the growth, the kind of the relationship of the effect with the cause. Is it still aware of the cause? You can say that's growth. If it's not aware of its cause, then it's a totally like it's a creation of a different nature maybe. It's kind of like, think of it this way. If life is like a candle, and the light of the candle, the flame of the candle is consciousness, I'm seeing that we are like 8 billion candles lit at the same time. These 8 billion candles, it's as if the wax will melt one day. But the difference is that the light can be chosen by the candle where it's directed to. If the light of the candle was attention, attention is falling on every object, and the shadow of that object is becoming the subject. You see, guys, this is what I'm saying. This is where the new age community eventually will go and should be there already. It's the recognition that language, before we look at anything spiritual, metaphysical, mystical, we have to see how language is being the world for us, how meaning emerges, and what is your part in this experience of life. If you're the more your life goes out of control, the more you feel it's the unconscious. Okay, that means strangely, when Carl Jung said, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So that was another way of kind of Carl Jung saying, unless you make the unknown known, unknown forces will influence how you know things. But it's also that the unknown is intelligent. So this is the kind of rare challenge of us wondering about the intelligence in other dimensions. And the main challenge is are we the puppeteer? Am I the mover of my experience purely, or is there something else? For all those people who have a sort of emotional inclinations towards there being something else, a narrative will be seen as a bridge. The reason I feel, even if we had everybody become rational and everything became secular, I still feel it would not that it's unrealistic. It's like the scientist did the greatest scientific experiment, got the greatest results, then like a hunter gatherer was running back to society, and then realized, oh my God, I'm bringing this information to a society that is has an emotional dimension, where not everything is rational, that the creature has access to subtler planes, has access to imagination. When a person makes a decision, multiple potentials open. It's like when you don't know. It's, how can I tell you, it's like you're going to the parking, and you don't know which door. Let's say you're going somewhere and you don't know which door to take. It's like probabilities suddenly emerge. So for me, my subjective realm is strangely a door that is a mask upon that moment where I choose to consciously open and enter. Okay, this isn't on mute, is it? Okay, it's on. Pretty much, I'm looking at a empty room, and the phenomena in the empty room can be separate, or it can be all one phenomena. Either where uh, it's raining, we're all individual drops in existence, or all these raindrops are falling into the ocean. Socrates was, before he took the poison, he kind of gave a speech. He was, okay, here, I gotta tell you a little bit. Pretty much Socrates, back in the day where the ancient Greek gods was the kind of status quo's perception was the mainstream, Socrates was doing some next level underground stuff where to the youth of the children in Athens, he was talking about a totally he was sharing his experiential relationship with divinity. Do you know? And so some guy who disliked him kind of came and burdened him. And Socrates found himself in court and suddenly being sentenced. Socrates, he could have gone out of the situation, but he chooses to stay true to his morality, because we got to understand right now our civilization doesn't take character so seriously. But back in the day, the stoic mindset, just the mentality of your attitude was your destiny. Do you see? So conduct was held in high regard. And so Socrates, to his decision, he chose to take the poison. It was this weird thing where he would take the poison, and his body would get numb from the bottom to top. And so there's a picture drawn, and he's suddenly saying his last words, and he's giving this next level speech, and he's his most famous, like not most famous, but there's this famous thing about Socrates where he says, "No, Socrates," right? And so this is where in that story, Socrates is looking at people and he's saying, those people who have condemned me will have to suffer with material existence to come. But I'm going somewhere. I'm going to a place where either there will be no Socrates, there will be no personality, or I am going to a place where all the questions I've had in this life will be finally answered. It's as if we have to consider language as a world inside a world. How might, like right now, as I'm communicating to you, my experiential knowing, that means what I've experienced, what has come to me as real, that, believe it or not, as much as I try, very tiny percentage of it can be put to words. A lot, the body, this body of ours, it can be conducted in different ways. That means when psychologists wondered about what is fragmenting the psyche, they realized ultimately it's where the attention of the human being is going and what kind of trail it has walked on so far. So it's like when you really care about your intelligence, you have to wonder how it happened. And so there was a time where I didn't care for my past. I just wanted to forget it, you know? But then I wondered, in 2011, when I suddenly noticed, like this question came to me. I was sitting on a rock in the middle of a river. The river was coming from behind me, right? So I was looking at the water, and I remember I was kind of seeing a natural metaphor of the water going forward, kind of like time going forward. So it was this strange thing where I felt, even if I failed in this life, so many things are just endlessly going forward that it's like, what is the real value? Now, two different arguments can be made here, but before I get into that, on that rock, I asked myself a question I had never asked myself. It had never occurred to me in my life, this question. To this day, I would say it was like, it was a divine question. It was like a butterfly landed on my forehead for a moment, a divine butterfly. And it was like in that moment, I asked myself, who is looking through these eyes? Like, who is looking? And I noticed every answer I gave, I could give another answer. I could give another answer. And then I noticed, what is this? Is my mind just a projector where I'm kind of moving my hand in front and off from the lens? You know? So I began to see the mind is doing something which I am aware of that has nothing to do with the witness. So that was when I started developing a relationship with the moment that was not just personality oriented. That means your body, yes, you have to be a person in this civilization, but your mind is a presence. That means there was the story of Bodhidharma where some guy came up to him and he's like, Bodhidharma, please pacify my mind. I'm restless. And Bodhidharma didn't listen to the guy, and then the guy cut off his hand. The story's savage. This Zen story is pretty savage. Like the guy cuts off his hand and looks at Bodhidharma as a sign of loyalty. I don't know why that was a sign of loyalty, but as a sign of loyalty, he says, Bodhidharma, please help me. I can't sleep. I'm restless. The guy feels he's being destroyed from the inside, from his inner realms are turbulent. Pretty much it's a storm behind his eyes. You know? It's like bad weather in the inner realms. And sometimes when the inner realms are intense, the person has to take shelter in the outer realms, you know? By the way, guys, sorry for these intermissions that happen, these gaps in the middle of the talk. I mean, sometimes I got to drink something or like take a breather. Anyways, the guy says, Bodhiyama, my mind's restless. Please pacify my mind. Bodhiyama looks at him, and Bodhiyama is the fifth patriarch of Buddhism. He's pretty much a dude who took Buddhism to Japan from India. Bodhiyama says, okay, I'll pacify your mind, but bring your mind here so I can pacify. And the guy looks at Bodhiyama and the guy's like, what? And Bodhiyama's like, bring your mind. This mind that is causing your problems, that is the source of your suffering, that can't let you sleep, that is this chaos that you're perceiving, that is this fight you have to fight. Okay? Bring this mind in front of me. Bring this mind in front of me so I can pacify it. And the guy suddenly looks around, thinks about it, and he's like, where's my mind? Where's my mind? And he realizes he can't find it. He looks at Bodhiyama and says, I can't find my mind. And there's this long silence. Then Bodhiyama says, there, your mind is pacified. And he pauses. When he pauses, instantly in that moment, the guy attains nirvana. He attains nirvana because he sees the problem was never there. The problem was never there. I feel the same way. The body, the person has to go to the gym, has to exercise. The mind has to be engaged in some performance of a value exchange. Now, this performance of a value exchange, unfortunately, our civilization is like it's like a fax machine. The kind of the way I see kind of how civilization is designed, it's like, I mean, technologically, yes, on some level, bacteria from the bottom of the sea is um, standing on skyscrapers, you know. But on another level, it is there. How can I tell you? It's if there is something better, and if one can see that something better, it means it is a potential parallel reality. And then the decision has to be, if I see something better, what do I do about it? I feel the species has to be ushered in to a new elegance and a new relationship and sophistication with objectivity and subjectivity. We're no longer just observers of objects. When you become an observer of a subject, that's when you're intelligent. I would say that. That's when intelligence can discriminate that it is not the thought in that instant. And so it's like there are certain wheels, or you can say certain dualities, certain axes, certain dualistic relationships that the person has to acknowledge. Axi, I think, is the plural. um, Emptiness, fullness, nothingness, something, like that would be that. It would be the known and the unknown. It would be the chaotic and the ordered. It would be the visible and the invisible. These are all dualities that the person has to be able to comfortably acknowledge and be able to have a sort of conscious awareness of both. That means if a person goes somewhere and there's fear, it means there is resistance, resistance of the intelligence to its own self. And intuition is a very unique thing. I've had moments where I've done things intuitively and strangely it saved my life. I just felt I had to just get up and leave somewhere. I felt like literally my whole moment of being had left that room. Think of it this way: the personality is ideological, the presence is experiential. That means there's a dimension of awareness through sight, through the presence of sight. And then there is everything else that comes over what is seen. So we are processing data. The data is objective, but the processing is subjective. How fascinating. To realize you have an inner realm means that if you look in the mirror, you will still notice that you don't know what your potential is. And that has been, to be honest, the progression of evolution. I mean, think of the design as creatures. Why do we have voices? Why aren't we like insects? You know, I'm not saying insects don't communicate, but I'm just saying like, why are we kind of designed for communication? And I feel because that's where the gift is. I feel advanced communication waters the soul and it sprouts anew. When you consider the subjective realm, the first thing you got to consider is that your subjective realm is different than other people. And this is kind of, I don't know, this is my approach to it, but this whole cosmos has a strange design. And it's kind of like you're always alone, yet it's like you're always with everything simultaneously. So I don't know how to say it, but it's like the inner realms is the separation, the outer realms is strangely. When I say the inner realms is separation, I mean like, think of it this way: all sensory perception is being received at once, but the sequence in which it is processed, and that sequencing is internal. It's kind of like this. It's like it's not just objects moving around. That's what I'm saying. Subjects are moving around, and sometimes subject mask objects, and that object forever becomes that subject, and we forget that it was ever an object. I remember writing a very profound statement that behind every human being's eyes, there are libraries. And these libraries can only, through the free will of that human being, be released into the external realm. We share the same external realm, but our inner realms are different approaches to the external. We are not a civilization of clones. We are a civilization that is unique, so it means our inner realms are meant to be individual, but our outer realms must go more collective. And I think the reason we feel it's like the nature of man is by some philosophers considered good is because good is more efficient. Every human being has a relationship with the unknown, of course. I mean, like, people haven't just been standing around. Experience moves you. Experience is a suggestion that your state of mind alters not just by every environment you step into, but in every how you interpret the environment. I want to read some things I've written, guys. I think it may be interesting to some. So in 2015, I went on a kind of writing frenzy, and um, this is one of those poetry books where they tend to be kind of existential hymns. So I'm going to read one of the poems that is titled "Where Does Thought Come From?" Where does manifestation introduce herself to man? Is duality enough to look at existence and understand? What makes the home of homes a place to be? Where is the value of your life, really? The world is boundless when omniscient friends are always at your gathering. The soul of the world is a moment unborn. Ask yourself, where are you until you see dawn dawn on you? Every fascination is void, so you realize you are truth's keeper. Be so free that the constant the, be so free that the constellations become meditative when you remember you're all seeing. So I'll read the next poem after too. Don't make life into a story. So this is poem number 16 from the book My Solaris. I'm gonna make my kind of work available hopefully soon. How can the character, through all settings, remember the storyteller beyond any mistake? When you are cruel to another, you have allowed the universe to be cruel to itself. Be so peaceful, the peace was always full. Some wordsmiths think they're pretty cool. Do you feel they are blind, or is it the moment that breeds awe? We are purity incarnate. Do not let joy down when you are above your beyond. Don't make life into a story, for you may forget you're all of it. So don't make life into a story, for you may forget you're all of it. And that's the thing. It's like our minds don't need freedom of speech. They need freedom of existence. And that freedom of existence seems to be administered with a certain balance in the objective realms and a certain endless vision in the subjective. That means you tell me who will work harder. I mean, this is debatable, of course, but who would work harder? A person who feels they're an eternal being, or a person who feels they're a temporary being? I was just thinking, like, this is a playful thing to consider, right? Like, if a human being, like, imagine they thought they were eternal and they actually were, and imagine a person thought they were temporal and they actually were. Let's say we were in a kind of parallel dimension of the earth where reality was a mirror. The temporary being may feel, will judge the value and say there is no action, there's no point. There's no point in doing anything, and concludes a hedonistic perspective, imagine. Pretty much what it means is time is running out, so do whatever you want, right? So in some sense it means that. But you would see from an eternal standpoint, if time wasn't running out, how would you behave? How would you eat food? How would you speak if, for example, time was not linear in your experience? You would realize suddenly it's as if there is no rush. That feeling that there is no rush calms the mind from all desires. So strangely, when the idea of the future dismantles, there is no longer a concept of desire cannot exist. So without the future, you can never have a desire. It's like if free will provides an ability to glorify the suffering or glorify the greatness, it's like in any moment where if you could look at yourself like a dove in the air, like a white dove flying in the air after world peace, after world peace, like if you had an aerial view of yourself, it's kind of like I remember I went to Rishikesh, India, and somebody shared an incredible metaphor. And they said it was like somebody who's sitting on a mountain and looking at the traffic, and somebody who's in the traffic jam. The person in the traffic jam is super angry, but the person looking at the person from the traffic jam is not angry, you know? So it's kind of like we are moving to an unconditional witness of our conditions. How conditions are unconditionally here. That's the unique law of existence. For me, it's kind of strange, but at the end of the day, everything that happens is just the effort of energy to make the internal external, and then the person sleeps. So it's like, what is it? It's a landscape of engagement, your conscious waking state. Now, depending on how aware you are as a human being to your dream state, and you've been sensitive to the imagery and content found in your dreams, we can see that the simulated realm in the dream has nothing to do. That means that it's like we tend to, in the waking state, light enters our eyes and we see stuff. But when the person is asleep and in their dream, they're like running in a bright field on a sunny day. So in that dream, there is no light. You see, it's not a relationship of light, or it's kind of how light is still echoing. It's still causing the neurology to be active for a certain level. There was a yogi who, this is strange, and I don't know about its accuracy, but it was a suggestion. It was like it had a profound implication. There was this yogi who some scientists had found in India, and it was this very old, like above 100 age yogi. But he, every day he would wake up and he was not only, his personality was so liberated and happy and playful. It was also not playful per se, but like liberated, like free from itself, right? And the person, with this old man, the guy's like, "Yo, like, what is, like, what do you eat? Like, how does it work for you? How do you live?" And the guy's like, "I just stare at the sun 10 minutes a day." This yogi, of course, I'm not advising this. This yogi said this, right? For us, for a modern civilization, it would mean of finding some sort of technology that translates light into more of an energetic reception than it is. I don't know. But, anyways, the guy kind of would stare at the sun, and when they checked his body, it's like all the processes of his whole body would happen, appear in manifestation, then they would unmanifest. So, like, kind of like, I don't know how to say it, but it's like this dude had a relationship with sunlight that was the energy of his whole existence. Like, I don't know. I woke up from a conscious dream, a dream I was able to move in. I woke up and I got shocked. I got shocked after the dream. Usually people get shocked by what they dream about. I got shocked when I woke up because the inactivity of the body, but still the activity of the mind happening. It was such a fascinating concept. It was like instant conviction that there's multidimensionality here. There's more than just one system. It's like you have a cardiovascular system, you have a nervous system as a human being. So these are all a bunch of systems in the same kind of or organism's experience. So I kind of began to see there's a relationship of the conscious with the unconscious and the unconscious with the conscious, right? And the known with the unknown. And so, really, it's like if we're so obsessed about what we feel we know, we will ignore the unknown. And when we ignore the unknown, civilization slows down because people have fallen into loop patterns. So to accept the efficient means to miss out. To accept the inefficient means to miss out on the efficient. Every moment of your life where you have allowed yourself to see yourself in a lesser light, and in that exact moment, you could have also seen yourself in a better light. And when you care for the world, I consider your true nature takes the steering wheel more. And then life becomes not something you're running after, it becomes a performance of the true presence of nature. That means ultimately, this may be an intense thing for a human being to say, but I feel our being is inseparable from nature. So it's kind of like just because I have a name as a human being doesn't mean that name is just this body's intelligence. Ultimately, it's self and world. That dynamic is there. So it means the world has a relationship with the self, and the self has a relationship with the world. And how much should there be an attention to the relationship of the self with the world? So far, it's like scarcity and resources. Guys, it's like this. It's like there's something unknown going on. The civilization has attempted to know it. It has known it to a certain capacity. Now we're realizing the known is stagnating. And it's stagnating because rather than people going towards collective responsibility, caring for a 4 billion-year-old civilization, they are. It's of course our own. We want to drive our own life first, and then the life of kind of contribute to the what do you call it, to the collective vision. Because I thought about it, everything that I have done personally, just for myself, it's been short lived because the self updates all the time. It's like you can't have a desire and that desire being satisfied and not having another desire. It's like, you know, it's like you go to a restaurant, it was a good restaurant, so you go again, you know. I find that when we distance ourselves from how we have to be a certain subject all the time and to be certain in a certain way all the time, we find a freedom. And the freedom has to come with a permission. It has to be like you kind of, it's like you kind of patting your inner child on the back and being like, it's okay, you're okay, whatever you are, you know. So it's a trust of the whole mind. Because after some point it's like they should be definitely discussions on this. Philosophers should come and scope all branches of knowledge, you know. Carl Jung made one of the most valuable contributions, and honestly, without him I wouldn't be able to even kind of tap into certain to kind of he kept a mode of thought alive. uh, it's as if, how can I tell you, someone leaving behind a map. Carl Jung left behind a map. He it's and that map is not an instruction, it's a command. It's a command without any it's like there is it's like it's like knowledge's march into the unknown. That's the command. If someone was to ask me right now, who am I would say the in as let's say if somebody asked me, who are you beyond your individual consciousness, I would say I am a rhythm. There's the psychology has just become the witness of a rhythm. It appears that way. I'm not saying like that's it, but I'm just saying the mind has an ability to not be the surfer on the wave, but to also be the wave. And when you realize that, your inner realms open up. You realize nobody can save you from what your eyes can only see. And that's why responsibility will suddenly be seen in a different light. That it's really about you wondering what is your ability in responding to things. I remember my uncle saying something very valuable. He said, in an emergency, take a step back, breathe, and then look at the situation. And it was as if, like in this life, we will go through many moments of impact, collision, unexplainable change. In those moments, there requires to be a stepping back and observing, and that stepping back is identifying as the attributeless, not identifying, but like it's like your mind has to. It's like in order to use something, you have to observe it. And if you can't observe something properly, you can't properly use it. So if you can't observe information properly, you can't properly conclude it in that moment. So it's like that distance of observance is required. And life has been conditioned in such a way that people feel they have to kind of be moving all the time. Sometimes in great moments, sometimes the greatest visions I feel arrive in stillness and silence. And that stillness and silence also means an inner stillness and silence. The inner stillness of silence means your intentions are content. You have looked at this world, and that's when honor begins, honor for the unknown. That's why I find it's like many scientists will look at the students of the next generations and be like, why aren't these kids being excited to go explore the cosmos, you know? And it's because the honor for the unknown is gone, because the mystery has been wiped out, because the imagination has been nullified. And the nullification of the imagination is a disservice to the what the civilization's potential could have been. That means we don't know what the minds of human beings harbor. Some human beings in history, they did messed up stuff. Some human beings did very simple stuff. And so both had a value. Both became kind of colors on the spectrum, colors of human activity and intensity. Marcus Aurelius tells us the soul is dyed with the colors of its thoughts. And the word dyed means kind of like painted in. So it's kind of like your awareness is colored by how your sense of self is colored. It's okay. It's like the Yoga Patanjali Sutras kind of said the same thing in the way that it's like a glass orb moving through different colored surfaces. So what is that? That's a suggestion that it's like your awareness is a glass orb. The world and the environment and the ecosystem where the self gets its definitions from is kind of how the orb identifies with the color underneath, with the earth underneath. So we are like, I wouldn't be surprised on some level where on this rock there's just spheres of energy moving, and all this reality could be potentially a simulation. Who knows? You know, that could be a bit far fetched, but you know, I felt like that idea should remain alive. It's realizing that there is no one else who can conduct or access experientially your vision other than yourself. So believe it or not, you don't understand you have free will until you realize the joy of how man's mind began becoming responsible for building its world. There's a joy in there. There's a joy in being an energetic being, and that energy being directed towards a more continuous efficiency. And civilization is lacking that because the child doesn't wake up and it's like, oh my god, I'm alive in an advanced civilization, I can't wait to just go and every imagine all the organizations are efficient at that point. The child doesn't wake up like that. The child wakes up and it's like, oh another day. you know I feel we're reaching the era of advanced communication. It's like the inner realms of people are being bridged. I don't think the world has to shy away from its freedom just to maintain a certain discipline. I feel we should pour out our inner realms. My whole intention with the hunter gatherers of the inner realms was that you, as a human being, have access to a certain vision of the world based on your unique DNA. You're seeing the world like your worldview is relatively unique, but it's kept hidden and dormant. And at most, maybe when you're in society or around other people, you navigate through certain kind of culturally abiding programs. You abide by the cultural program. But I'm telling you, there is hidden value behind the eyes of an unhidden self. And the value of the mind is in its expression. So you kind of keep your mind alive by being fascinated by uh, the relationship of the known with the unknown and the unknown with the known. So really, it's pretty cool. Philosophy has reached the point where it can now very freely begin considering human intelligence no longer just, it's like a separation between the humanhood and the intelligence. It's like the intelligence is a field and the human is like a particle in the field, right? So when we realize this intelligence is not just moving the human, it's moving everything else, then the person suddenly is like, what do I identify with, omniscience or this? So that's so that's what I feel. It's eventually comes like, so what that means is personality is hovering in my own school of thought, I say, between the zero dimension, or let me say it like this: personality is hovering between the one dimension and the infinite dimension, but the one dimension and all the other dimensions are conditional to the zero dimension. So what I mean by that is the void is holding stuff, and stuff is holding mind, and mind is holding language, and language is the character in the story that's being like the tada moment of an infinite kind of consideration. That means the only way we feel we're infinite is because the free will, on some level, by nature, knows that it doesn't have access to everything. But energetically, energy is everywhere as energy. So if we say energy cannot be created or destroyed and changed, how can something change without a part of it being destroyed? So it would mean that the only way an energy that cannot be created or destroyed can change is if the surface of that energy changes. Ultimately, on some level, that energy is changeless. So what that means is it's kind of cool. Imagine inside the black hole, the universe is just a picture. It's not moving and dynamic. I'm not. Of course, there's no saying what's inside a black hole. Like that's why we call it a black hole. But we know that the gravitation is so intense that it's like whatever biological creature that enters with the subjective sophistication, the objectivity would instantly vanish. So it's kind of like wondering if we have souls or we are all a field of energy conscious of itself through various ways. So it's a unique time for philosophy. You know, that's why I was so fond of bringing, um, you know, to life the idea of School of Athens 2.0. That I was considering inevitably, like, okay, human beings have to go into units, and I would recommend units of four. You know, so like four people, four friends, begin conversing about reality, about the nature of reality. That we have to realize if we don't treat our language differently, we won't see anything else in the subjective realms. Sometimes it's like Lao Tzu had this quote. He said, "You got to let go of who you are now to become who you're meant to." And guys, I'll tell you, because I do understand that we're a society kind of like, you know how the caveman suddenly they found fire and they freaked out? Yeah. So I could totally understand the civilization accessing a newer and efficient narrative may cause it to kind of react. But the whole point of civilization is conscious administration. The whole point of the jungle is unconscious administration. And we have an opportunity to move as a biological being in such a more sophisticated way than other animals. That means sometimes sometimes I look at animals, and I'm like, I feel sad. I'm like, they don't have access to the brilliant higher dimensions of the world, you know. And then there's times where I like see like hear like some kind of you know you know kind of unsettling story, and I'm like, oh man, these animals are lucky they can't hear this. So I feel we must become responsible for our subjective realm. The true association with an energetic presence of a conscious observer means that you can no longer use language. At most, use language like a shield, but don't use it like a sword. That means it's like a technology is as efficient as it is used for what it's intended for. Like if you use chopsticks instead of a hammer, it would be inefficient. So it's like the human design has strangely just built within it. It's like the maps of it's like Carl Jung, the way he was kind of wondering about this kind of map to the unconscious. Let me tell you, I think what he realized is that we are the map. I think he realized experience is the substratum of conception. So that experience ultimately will be unknown because it had to be there before the known could be known. So it's like regardless of how you think about it, it's like rather than being afraid in this life, the person should be kind of mysteriously fascinated. I think that's the most kind of efficient approach. Because anytime I've been fascinated, it's as if all the personal desires have washed off in an instant, have evaporated, and I've just looked at what was there. The wonder of how that system was active, you know? How the gears of nature move regardless of how man shapes it. And how time could be an engine in a timeless state. How we could have even engineered time. And just the fact that the person has to look at his watch, that's probably means like it's the person naturally doesn't hold the concept of time, which strangely means time is an unnatural concept to a creature that is just present as an energy. Time is like the luxury, you know. That means for some mystics, kind of like if you ask them, some imagine you ask the Himalayan yogi, it's like, hey man, what time is it? And he's like, I don't have the luxury to consider the concept of time, man. So, anyways, guys, my whole effort and intention is that you, as a human being, to not be convinced by ideology that has presented itself to you in one moment, and for you to realize that evolution after 4 billion years has brought us to such a unique place that it's like, because it's like we're not trees, we're not like other animals, we're not meant to just do nothing, and we're not just meant to kind of go with our desires only, with our animalistic instinct. The point is the observer. The observer is, it's like every child behind their eyes is experiencing life as it's like they're inside a film, you know? So life is like a material film, you know? And it's very fascinating. Language is a two-dimensional interpretation on a three-dimensional phenomenon. Isn't it fascinating? When I say two-dimensional, I'm saying in the sense that language exists in duality. So strangely, I think we have to evolve our languages, and even though I say the language is a technology, it's not the language that's advanced, it's the viewer. The technology's soul is the user of the technology. You are the soul of your car when you're driving, you know? So I don't know. It's kind of fascinating. Beyond ideology, we don't even have conception. We don't have language for it. I say that's why I've created the term the language threshold. This is gonna save all those people who are lost in the kind of whack-a-mole point a finger who has ego kind of situations that happen in life. Because I'm telling you guys, I've been in conversations where at the end of it, it was like just people pointing at each other's subjective realms and shouting that each other's subjective realms are wrong. For me, my inner realms, it first came through writing because I was a very shy person. I was just a very kind of quiet and shy kid just from the beginning, you know. But in that shyness and kind of like quietude, my mind was still observing, you know. That means just because someone is in a room and they're not talking doesn't mean they are not having ideas behind their mind. No. A new consciousness would mean a new evocation of language. A new evocation of language means you have to come to a kind of static point. So think about this, that what is the personality? How are people seeing each other as people? It's like there's a moving body, there's a voice, there's a sound, there's a symbolic attribution of name and identification and positions and history and story and character and all this, and freedoms and rights and universal positions and whatnot. So what it is it's something that's moving. Like this is the simplest way that one can explain that the personality is a simulation of a conscious movement. Sometimes I've slept, like I've come home at the end of the day, and like in my spare time, like when I find that like I could, it's like what, how can I tell you, like um, like if all my financial endeavors were completed, I would probably um, go on a journey of kind of experiential exploration. So like I don't know how to say it, but it's like life is filled with endless Rubik's cubes, and the algorithms will be people who are born in the even in the future. That means it's like your inner realm is an algorithm to some puzzle of the civilization. You know, honestly, it for now I would say our civilization is going by the strategy fake it till you make it. Yeah. You know, believe that there's something better and it will be. It's like, Yeah, it will be, but only in the inner realms. Unless somehow internal movement becomes external. And even though there are philosophers, like if you were fond of Jean-Paul Sartre, you would kind of say there is no distinction between the essence and the surface, the depth and the surface. Freedom is not just a blank canvas, it is also the willingness to pick up the brush and decide on a paint and draw. And all artistic activity is innovative in the sense that it is a new unknown action. That means the novelty that you have an ability to engage with is your divinity. So the presence of attention right now, there, if you through movement and noise is dualistic personality, it has been becomes a personality, and complete stillness and silence becomes the witness, becomes the attributeless witness. We're oscillating between the known and the unknown, in other words. And that's why I say conscious piloting through as far as evolution has granted us an ability. You pilot your plane of existence. And a plane has two wings, and life appears chaotic and ordered. And your attention is piloting through this. Eventually, after I consider this as just honest endurance towards a dedication of an inner vision, you will be pulled to new environments. That means imagine you're a master martial artist and a student comes, and an arrogant student comes. How do you teach that arrogant student? How do you teach a student that thinks they're already a master what you see? Okay, like imagine a Shaolin monk seeing a Shaolin monk kid kind of thinking he's better than all the Shaolin monks. It's like the Shaolin monk would throw the kid towards the ultimate challenge. And kind of when the person has a very solid ego, life will suddenly give him the most intense thing, because they are claiming their inner realm is claiming that the outer realm won't change. And to speak of an inner realm and outer realm, here's the cool thing. It's like there's an inner self and an outer self. The outer self you see in the mirror, the inner self, when you close your eyes and you're in bed, it's that wakefulness behind your eyes. That's the inner self. So the inner self, its world is projected through language and image, and it can be even through other sensory faculties. So you can say this is kind of cool. Um, Sensory data, it's being processed through dualistic lenses, patterns, axioms, existential positions. And it's like chaos is being received in an ordered way. When we see that the human intelligence can do that, the mystery of the organization, how it's like, yo, neuron, why did you run that up that alley instead of that one? So, anyways, guys, nothing energizes a person more than that which is important to them. Passion doesn't activate unless there's something is important for you. And Importance doesn't mean just future preparation. Importance kind of means by being true and being able to not just be a complex sense of self, but being a simple sense of self. In that simplicity, the unknown will allow your intelligence to occur in a new way. That means kind of like when life is getting too complex, navigate simply. When life is getting too simple, don't be afraid to be complex. Honestly, like if we were a civilization of robots, like we say robots are programmed. And so human beings, what's their program? Language. Language is the program. It's a simulation of the realm. And it's an incredible opportunity. And ultimately, the evolution of language, I say personally, this is one of those Mr. Within quotes I hope gets remembered. Geometry is the next great language of all other languages, of all the other languages. Why geometry? Because the designer's vision doesn't emotionally discriminate. It's a language superior to our emotions. It's geometry. And geometry externally it tends to appear as static unless somebody has like a hologram of a geometrical shape on a wall moving or in 3D space. Or in your inner realms, geometry can be alive, but it's not alive to a self. It's just, it's kind of like when you stand on a balcony and look outside, you're just scanning a landscape. And my relationship with the inner realms no longer became what belief to hold, like kind of Schmiegel from, like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. It's like what precious belief to hold now. Like it's like it moved away from the kind of belief shopping game, and it came to experience. Now I'm here. What now? Engage kind of situation. So it's like you have to trust your mind because your mind is being your whole moment. So inevitably, if we design a civilization where the human being can trust it, it will also give its efficiency too. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this talk has been helpful. I'm still trying to figure out what the best model of kind of running this whole channel and everything is. I think I'm going to start a new channel where I'm going to have a whiteboard, and that's going to make it easier to kind of slowly bring in geometry into these lectures, you know. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and namaste.